Hey everyone, this is Dr. David Song, and today we'll be talking about yoga butt. And yoga butt is also slang for proximal hamstrings tendinitis or tendinopathy, which is a pathology of the hamstrings tendon. Pain can be reproduced when you're bending over or when bringing the leg into hip flexion. This is because it puts a tensile load on the hamstrings tendon. Now you can imagine if this tendon is irritated or chronically inflamed due to overwork, it can produce pain when it's being stretched out. It's a classic sign of a tendinitis or a tendinopathy. Hamstring tendinitis tends to occur in people who do a lot of yoga because yoga actually requires a ton of hip flexibility. Due to your anatomy, when you bend over, your hamstrings muscle is elongated and as such puts a stretching load on the hamstrings tendon. This type of injury tends to occur in people who do a lot of yoga because not only are you asked to go into end range hip flexion to stretch out that hamstring muscle, but you're asked to hold this position for a prolonged period of time. A lot of people don't really understand that you can actually overstretch a muscle, and that overstretching can lead to pathological changes in the muscle or the tendon. This is especially true for those who are new to yoga and for those who are jumping into it many times a week. And these are the same people that went from doing nothing to doing 5 times a week. This typically happens from being deconditioned for such a long time and by living a sedentary lifestyle. As such, the hamstrings and the hamstring tendon becomes deconditioned from doing nothing all day. And because you're not doing much all day, they can't handle you all of a sudden doing a ton to it. A lot of people think yoga is really good for you and it has its benefits, but you have to remember that the poison's in the dose. So you have to remember to look at how often you're doing it, as well as how intense you're doing your workouts. When it comes to any tendinopathies or tendinitises in general, strengthening exercises are the go-to. Particularly for the hamstrings, any exercise that requires hip extension and knee flexion, it's going to be beneficial for the hamstrings muscle. Likewise, because it's affecting the muscle, it will also affect the hamstrings tendon as well. If you don't really know what tendons are, they connect muscles to bone, which means every time that you're using the hamstrings muscle, you're using the tendon. Before we get into the strengthening exercises, we're actually going to start mobilizing the hamstrings tendons and muscle so that you can feel better while you're doing these exercises. The first exercise that we're going to do is the hamstring self-massage. For this exercise, you'll need a massage ball and an elevated seat or stable table to sit on. You're going to take that ball and put it under a tender spot of the hamstring. Now, the hamstrings is a very large muscle, so you might have to pick multiple points along that muscle belly in order to fully massage it out to completion. What you're going to do is you're going to find a tender spot, place your thigh on that ball, and then you're going to slowly extend the knee to get an active release of the muscle. Now you'll do about 4 to 5 slow kicks before moving on to another point. Typically, I like to pick between 3 to 6 tender points along the hamstring muscle belly. On average, I do about 3 on the inner part of the hamstring and 3 on the outer part of the hamstring. But for you, just go by feel. You don't have to do 6 points. You could do 1, 2, or even 8, depending on how big your hamstring muscle is. Next, we're going to do a dynamic warm-up for the hamstrings muscle and tendon. You don't need any equipment for this. All you need is some ample space. These are called floor sweeps. You'll be bending over with one leg straight in front of you and one leg bent. The target leg will be the leg that's straight. You'll be bending over with your hands and you'll be swinging them to graze the floor. A very light stretch is what we want to experience. If you feel a very intense stretch, back off. We actually don't want to push it into a very deep stretch at this point. If you do feel a very deep stretch, just don't bend over as far. Yes, this might mean that you won't be able to sweep the floor with your hands, but that's okay. Just go as far as you can and swing your hands back and forth. I like to do about 6 to 8 repetitions. Don't want to go into a deep stretch. We just want to mobilize the tissues to prepare for the next exercise we're going to do. The next exercise we're going to do is the hamstring bridge exercise. Now, when you're doing these types of exercises, it is important to realize that a tendinitis will likely feel some amount of discomfort or mild amounts of pain while you're doing the exercises. Here are some guidelines to follow. If the pain experienced during the exercises is a 3 or 10 or less, then you don't have to really worry about it too much if the pain does not linger after the exercise or the pain does not get aggravated the day after. Now, this will take some experimenting because you won't know necessarily how your body will respond to this exercise. So start off easy. The hamstring bridge is a great exercise because it actually gets you to do both of the actions that a hamstring does namely hip extension and knee flexion. In this exercise, it is really important that you keep the spine neutral. A common mistake is to hyperextend the low back by allowing the pelvis to tilt forwards. In order to prevent that from happening and to target the hamstrings more effectively, be sure to brace the core as if you're pressing outwards. From here, you want to keep your feet about hip distance apart, and you want to keep your knees at a 120 to 135 degree angle. This will make sure that you feel it in the hamstrings, which is the back of your thigh, and not the quads, which is the front, or the glutes, which is your buttock region. Unlike in the video that I'm showing right now, it is important to maintain a 5-second negative tempo, which means when you lift your hips up off the floor, you want to take about 5 seconds to lower them back to the ground. When you're doing this exercise, it's very important that you get at least 5 to 10 degrees of hip extension. This is to make sure that you're actually recruiting the hamstrings muscle. You could do anywhere between 8 to 15 repetitions depending on how difficult these feel to you. If you're feeling a cramping sensation, which is pretty common in those with hamstring injuries, you can stop for 5 seconds, take a break until the cramp eases off, and continue back with your set. Typically, beginners would do anywhere between 1 to 3 sets for this exercise. It really depends on how good or bad these exercises feel and how much effort you're putting into this exercise. Next exercise we're going to be going over is the hamstring slider. At this point, we're going to take those slider discs and put them underneath your heels. If you don't have any slider discs, you can use a hand towel instead. You're going to place the discs underneath your heels and bridge your body up into a hamstring bridge. From here, you have to maintain hip extension as you slide the heels away from your body. Take about 5 seconds to drop your pelvis towards the ground. From there, tuck your heels back in, bridge back up, and slowly slide those heels back out. Just like the hamstring bridge version, you want to make sure that the spine is in neutral the entire time by bracing the core. The advanced version of this exact same exercise is the full-fledged hamstring slider. The hamstring slider exercise will get you to put those discs underneath your heels and to bridge up. Maintaining the bridge, you're going to slide your heels all the way out, and without dropping the pelvis all the way to the ground, you're actually going to slide the heels back in. The important part is that you maintain the hip extension angle. A lot of people who have difficulty with this exercise will actually allow the hip to go into flexion instead. If you can't complete that, that's okay. Just go back and do the eccentric version that I mentioned just a second ago. Alright, and those are your mobility and strengthening exercises for yoga butt. If you like my content, please subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions about this video, please let me know in the comments below. If you do have yoga butt, I want to know how you got it. I want to know your thoughts on this exercise program. I want to know if you thought these exercises were effective or if they did not work for you. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.